I actually have to. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's just like people are getting here.
When I went for all my ingredients, nobody had dried mushrooms.
I haven't been able to find them recently.
Well, I actually went to the Market District Shadyside and talked to the produce manager. He said, we've been trying to order dried mushrooms, but we're not getting them in. So I don't know whether it's pandemic related, but I figured.
They're in some storage container.
Yeah, probably on a ship.
Yeah.
Laura, I have some right now in my cupboard that I got a really long time ago and forgot about until you just mentioned it.
Well, according to what my research says, what they used to do is they gathered the mushrooms once a year and they dried them on their stove and it lasted for the entire year. So you're good. You're good. It should be good. That's the beauty of drying things out. It saves it. But that's the part that basically we're going to pretend that we're doing that. But obviously I'm improvising and I ended up getting a couple other types of fresh mushrooms that.
Yeah, I asked last time I was at Market District too, and they were like, nope.
I went to East End Food Co-op too. I figured that they may be. And I was just too tired to go to Whole Foods. That was the only other place that
I'm guessing that nobody has them.
Probably not. So
I was reading this very exciting Slovenian cookbook the other day, and this woman is describing how her husband would go out into the woods and bring back a bag with like 50 pounds of foraged mushrooms. And I'm like, this woman doesn't know how lucky she has it. I couldn't forage an edible mushroom in Pittsburgh to save my life, even if I knew how to identify them, which I do not.
But there is mushroom foraging around here.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And actually, Michelle Clark is talking about doing a program for families sponsored by Watts on mushroom foraging.
Really? That's incredible.
Yeah. That would be fun.
You have to make sure it's not poisonous, and you have to be knowledgeable about that.
Yeah.
Well, I think Michelle has the background where I think that.
Well, she's got somebody who's an expert to lead.
Oh, okay. So she's not going to do it herself.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Where is Susan? Her pictures are gorgeous.
She is in St. Martin. So, I mean, between Tanya being in San Juan, I mean, everybody that I know is traveling. I mean, they're beautiful pictures. Beautiful.
Michelle's in Mexico.
Yes. So, I mean, we have quite a few
This
people.
is on her face. Is this on her Facebook?
Yes.
She always takes beautiful pictures. I haven't seen those.
Yeah. So they're coming home Sunday. So I get to go. I get to go back to my house. I mean, I love Sally and it's great, but you know, I'm missing my house.
Of course.
Yeah.
They've been gone for a long time.
Yeah, and it kind of throws my routine off with Aiden and my work schedule and taking care of the dogs, my dog.
Right,
So,
of course.
yeah. So it's been fun, but it's time to go home. Time to go home.
Yeah.
So, oh well. So I get the onion that I used is very strong because that's all I'm smelling right now. I cut my onion. It's like, oh, but I love onions. So, and I have to tell you that when I tested the recipe, Aiden helped me, but obviously he's not here. And I was going to share why in my little rendition or whatever, but I have to give him credit. And actually there are some pretty fun things with this recipe that kids actually can do. And it can even be, it's like a game. I had lima beans all over the kitchen.
You did.
But I cleaned them all up. He had fun.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, we've got about 7 to 9 minutes before we'll start.
All right. Well, is there anything anybody wants to talk about?
We can talk about how exciting it is that we've got a cantor coming.
Yeah, well, he posted on
Yes,
Facebook,
he did.
and it was actually very nice hearing, seeing the comments from his current.
Yeah.
So, July, well, we still have a few months.
We do.
Yeah, but it'll go fast.
But at least we don't have to interview anybody else.
That's right. It's done. It's done. That's great. I'm sure that everybody involved is probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We were brainstorming ideas for fundraiser for next year. And I said we should have a fundraiser celebrating the end of transition. I said I'd make a really big donation just to celebrate.
I would give a donation to that. And I have not even been doing most of the work. I've just been having to send a lot of emails.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it was a long process, but well worth it.
Well worth it.
Yeah, well worth it. Hi, Marjorie. How are you? Oh,
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm so glad to see you join us.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Good.
I was trying to think when our convention was last. And
Wow.
I think it was October of 18.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's been a while. It's been a while.
Wasn't 19. No, 18.
No, it was 18 because it's always
18, yeah.
off a year from the biennials.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I saw that it's the WRJ convention's going to be in Pittsburgh for Jan's installation.
I read that.
Yeah. So I saw the emails that went out. So
that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Given COVID, I don't know.
Well, hopefully by 2023, I really hope we're not dealing with COVID.
I hope not.
Well,
this is enough.
Yes. I mean, I am like waiting for this vaccine to come out for my grandson who lives with me. And I was hoping that Pfizer's paperwork was going to go through, and my heart sunk to my feet when they said that they had to pull it. So
I know, because I have 3 grandchildren, all under 5.
Yeah.
And they're the same way. They're just so disappointed.
Yeah. Well, just have to take a deep breath and know that they are working on it, and it will come. It will come.
It'll come. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Hi, Joanna. So,
hello.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing okay. So glad to be here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we'll start in about 5 minutes, everybody.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone mind if Michael listens in?
Oh gosh, no.
Oh, good.
This is
I like him to cook as often as
anybody.
It's for everybody. Yes.
Great. I like him to cook as often as possible.
Oh.
I made a nice chicken piccata last week.
He did.
That turned out well, but we won't talk about the
all rotten potatoes.
Oh.
I forgot to cover it. And,
they were rotten.
It wasn't good. I think, yeah, it wasn't good. Never mind. Yeah. Well,
Joanna, you may have an interest in this book for your grandchildren.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, actually, it's called Entree to Judaism for Families. This is a book that I use with my 3-year-old grandson.
Well, fabulous.
So I, obviously within reason in regards to what his capacity is, but depending on the ages.
Sure.
But they actually go into it in regards to suggestions, depending on how old the kids are.
Great.
So,
and the title of that one was
Entree to Judaism for Families. I can actually share it. I was going to put together a summary with some various recipes, and I can.
Well, everybody's gotten all of your recipes.
Okay. And Tina Wasserman actually was the food columnist for Reform Judaism magazine for over 10 years.
Yeah.
And she is currently the editor for reformjudaism.com for the food section.
Oh, great.
I remember when she offered that book at a convention, and so many people from our congregation purchased it.
Well, there were a group of us that went up to Congregation Emmanuel Israel in Greensburg. They actually had her as a speaker. They had her at an event, and we went up, and I actually bought it there.
Nice. Are there Passover recipes in there?
Yes, I think there is. I'm pretty sure that it's pretty much all the Jewish holidays. It's a summary. So I'll have to, it's a good book.
Now, did everybody who is here get the cookbook for this series? If you didn't, just raise your hand and Sunshine will send it to you right now. You didn't get it? Okay. You send it to Joanna, Sunshine?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, of course.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, I'll email it to you right now.
Hi, it's Ronna back. Sunshine, I don't think I got it either.
Okay.
Did it come as an email?
We sent it along with the first email, but I actually think I forgot to attach it when I sent out the email today. So I'll send it to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks very much.
Okay, let's get started. Thank you all very much for joining us for our second in our 6-week series of cooking and baking like your Ashkenazic grandmother. Today we have Laura Fehl with us, cooking one of her most favorite things, mushroom barley soup. So I'm not going to talk anymore, and I'm going to leave it all up to Laura. But, feel free to interrupt her at any point and ask questions or whatever, or type something in the chat. We'll make sure she hears it.
Okay, so thanks, Mara, for inviting me to teach this class. And as Mara said, mushroom barley soup is one of my favorite soups. And this is the season where it's soup all the time. And I wanted to also thank all of you for coming and joining in the class tonight. And I hope you walk away with, flavor of mushroom barley and have a little more information about the history of it and the variations. So I love to cook, especially with my daughter, Sarah, and my grandson, Aiden. And in my eyes, a child is never too young to work in the kitchen alongside family members. Cooking Jewish foods with my daughter and now my grandson is a way of creatively connecting to our Jewish heritage. Learning about the various foods of the Jewish holidays and sharing memories. I am constantly sharing memories with Aiden about stories of my daughter and me cooking together at his age. He loves to hear about his mom. And I have to tell you that with him being in the kitchen with me as much as he is and learning, he's only 3 years old, but I have to tell you, he's becoming quite the chef. So you may have to watch out. You may have a new chef coming up. So I actually chose not to have Aiden with me while I was cooking tonight, because as you know, 3-year-olds he's used to, you know, my individual attention in the kitchen. So I didn't think it would work out so well, him interrupting our class to get my attention. So he did help me with a batch of soup I made for testing the recipe. So I will, you know, as I'm talking about preparing the recipe, I will share, I will actually share what he helped me with and how much fun we had together. So before we start cooking or, you know, working on the recipe, I wanted to give you a little bit of history about mushroom barley, which actually is called krupnik. So when you think of a classic Ashkenazi soup, what comes to mind? Anybody blurt? You can blurt it out.
Matzo ball soup.
Okay. Is there any other?
Borscht. Beet borscht.
Okay.
Cabbage.
With meat and without meat.
Okay.
Cold and hot.
So basically, most people will answer that question, chicken soup, with or without matzo balls. But chicken soup was a Shabbat and a festival soup. Krupnik was a daily soup back in the old country. So what is krupnik and what's its history? It's a simple and hearty Polish soup made from barley and various root vegetables. Mushrooms were added as an important ingredient due to Ashkenazi prized mushrooms. It's rich and nutritious, and most importantly, it was a free food source in the vast wooded areas where they lived. So they picked the wild mushrooms that had much more flavor than the ones that we currently, you know, commonly find in our produce section. And they dried them on their stoves and they preserved them and had them the entire year. So good quality dried mushrooms definitely take the taste of the soup up a notch. Unfortunately, I'm assuming because of the pandemic, when I went to look for dried mushrooms, I could not find them anywhere. So we're improvising, as sometimes we have to do. So krupnik actually is an archaic word for barley. So it isn't krupnik unless it has barley in it. The mushrooms added was a distinctly Jewish version of the soup. It's Polish in origin and has many variations, including meat, pork, chicken, or a combination of both. Obviously, due to the kashrut, pork was not an option for the Ashkenazis. Beef became the substituted meat, although it was more common to have the vegetarian version due to how expensive meat was. So I chose an easy recipe as I wanted to be able to include younger family members to be able to participate, or you take the recipe and try it with maybe your children or grandchildren, whatever, you know, if you so choose. There are many variations of krupnik in which I will provide, well, actually, no, you've already been provided. So as we're going along with the recipe, if you have questions, if you have something that you want to interject with mushroom barley that you happen to prepare. So I am all for this being, you know, kind of an interactive session.
Laura.
Yes.
Laura, what do you think the rutabaga adds to the soup?
Actually, that's similar to turnips.
I know what it is, but what do you think it adds?
So basically, turnips actually add a sharp flavor. Carrots add the sweet flavor. And the celery stalks or the celery roots actually add kind of an earthy flavor. So depending on what you like, you know, you can actually mix and match the root vegetables that you choose to put in to your liking. But those basically, you know, those are the flavors that it adds. And they did, you know, I know in one article that I read, they talked about celery stalks. They didn't use celery stalks in the old country. They used celery root, which basically celery stalks is probably the most similar to, you know, what flavor that adds to it in regards to the flavor itself. So I was actually going to start with the recipe, and in order for you to be able to see me working on it, I'm basically going to kind of position my laptop to where you see the working space in the stove, and you may not be able to see my voice, but I'm still here. So hopefully this will work. And any questions, comments, as Mara said, please feel free. So basically, again, we're improvising. It talks, okay, the first step in the recipe, which I think all of you have received, is basically you have your lima beans. Now I'm going to tell you, again, I had to improvise because I could not find the large lima beans, but in hindsight with my my grandson working with me, the small lima beans actually work better for him. So if you're making it, and you'll see why as we get to a step further down in regards to what we do with these lima beans. So the first step is basically taking them, putting them into a bowl. You can put it in a glass bowl, you can put it in anything, and you cover it with like an inch of water. And then this goes into the microwave for 3 minutes. So we'll put that in. Now I have everything set to where I have different stages. So basically after the microwave, this is what it looks like. It kind of expands it. And you have the microwave, and then you're supposed to let it sit for an hour. Obviously we don't have that much time. So I prepared it in the different phases so you could see it. So this is after it sits for an hour or two. So it's ready to be for the next step. So the second step, we're skipping because we don't have the dried mushrooms, but it's pretty simple. When you get the dried mushrooms, and you know, it's self-explanatory in regards to adding, adding the water, letting it, put it in the microwave for 2 minutes, let it sit. And basically the next step is peeling the lima beans. And this is where, if you are doing it, it's actually kind of fun. This is what Aiden did for me. And it's actually taking the lima beans out of the water, and you can do it. You can figure out what way you can do it best. But I'm going to tell you is that basically you can put it in the palm of your hand and basically squeeze it. And because it's soft, the skin actually comes off very easily. So what my grandson did, he actually put it on here and squeezed it. And sometimes when you squeeze it, they pop. So he was having fun doing it. And as long as it was staying within the range of the counter, everything was good. But it's fun for kids to get involved with this. And while you're doing that, but while your kids are doing that, or, if you choose to get your grandchildren involved, you can be working on the next step while they're still working on what they can do, because a lot of these steps your children may not be able to do. So basically you take the 1.25 cups of the lima beans, and you basically, it takes a little bit of time, but I think it probably doesn't take as much time when you're using the large lima beans. So if you're looking for a quick way, but you also have the option, you don't have to do the dried lima beans. If you want to make a quick soup, they sell the butter beans in cans. They sell them in the frozen section. butter beans and lima beans are actually one and the same. That's one thing that I learned because I didn't know that. So I don't know everything about cooking, and I'm always learning something. So here is the 1.25 cups of the lima beans, basically all de-skinned. And the reason why you do the de-skinning is because these lima beans actually become part of the broth. They get soft, and it kind of, you know, makes the broth a little thicker. So, and it adds some flavor to it too. Now, you may decide lima beans aren't your thing, but I'm going to tell you, I don't like lima beans. And when I ate this soup with the lima beans in it, you can't even tell that there are lima beans in it. It's just there for consistency, along with it probably adds some type of flavor to it, but you can't taste the lima beans if it's something that you prefer not to have. So I'm going to take this out because I'm going to make another batch at some point. But you take, you know, you put it in the microwave for 3 minutes, and then you set it aside for, you know, however long to cool it. So there are your lima beans. We've taken care of that. So now, again, we have the mushrooms. If we would have the dry mushrooms, it tells you what you need to do for, you know, pulling it out of the water and squeezing it gently. Now, I've actually seen recipes where they will actually take the dried mushrooms and pulverize it in a, my brain's not thinking, a Cuisinart. You can do that, but you can leave it, because basically when you're cooking down the soup, everything kind of you know, comes together. So so now basically have the mushrooms, which, because we didn't have dried mushrooms, I found cremini mushrooms that they basically said, you know, from the standpoint of the wild mushrooms, some of the suggestions that I saw in other recipes, you can, they basically say porcini is the one that is most suggested, because porcini mushrooms actually are from the old country. And I think if you're replicating an old recipe of your grandmother's or great grandmother's, you know, that somebody has been passing down, it probably will taste more like what they made. But the other mushrooms that they had said that are pretty good with flavor is the cremini mushroom, the shiitake mushroom, and the oyster mushrooms. And you can actually do, you know, one or a combination of all of them. So basically, I actually have the white mushrooms that are called for it, and these are the other mushrooms that we'll set aside. And basically, they're prepared. It's pretty easy. And there's really no right way or wrong way of cutting the things that you're putting in your soup. Again, it's a matter of preference as to whether or not you like your soups a little chunkier, or whether you like it more pureed. So, you know, it's really, you can improvise what you and your family may actually like. So
Laura,
yeah.
I think that if you look, it's okay, you don't have to show me.
Sure.
I think if you look on the container for baby bellas, I think those are actually cremini mushrooms.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Another piece of information that I will have to store, because again, I didn't realize that they were one and the same. So there you go. Okay. So portobello mushrooms are pretty common these days. I mean, I think that
these are the baby bellas.
The baby bellas. Okay. Okay. So again, I think that you can't go wrong with a soup. you know, you have your basic ingredients, and, you know, obviously you can follow a recipe and see how somebody else has made it. And if you don't quite like the taste, you just add whatever you want to taste. So that's why I like making soups. So basically we have everything prepared. I cut all the onions, I cut the celery, I cut the carrots in order to preserve time, so we can talk a little more. So the next step basically is taking extra virgin olive oil, and you want to heat up, you get you can do it in any, I use it's like a 12-inch frying pan, because I like to be able to have some room to move my onions and chopped vegetables around. And I don't want to have to worry about it coming out of the skillet, because I found that if you try to use too small of a pan, it makes it difficult to actually do the sauteing. So we have 1 onion. Let this the olive oil cook a little, and we have 1 onion that's chopped up. And again, I mean, basically, I think it's a matter of preference in regards to how small you make it. This is just the process of, you know, basically sauteing the onions, and do that. It doesn't take that much to do. So you're sauteing the onions. But in the meantime, while you're letting the onions saute, you can actually you know, put your prepared butter beans. You're putting those into your pot, which basically it's not showing very well. So we're putting the butter beans in the bottom of the pot. And then for the broth, basically there are so many different variations of broth. Basically, I typically get, you know, this seasoned, it's a vegetable base, and then just add water. But you have the bouillon, you can use these, and then there's stock powder, that you can use that. So whatever your preference is, and then you have, you know, the typical prepared broth, or you can make your own vegetable broth, which basically there are plenty of recipes in regards to making your own vegetable broth using root vegetables. So it's, again, it's your preference as to what you prefer. I tend to like, you know, prepared things, because I don't always have the time to make it homemade. So, you know, from that standpoint, it's whatever works for you. It all, you know, and again, they all have different flavors, but, you know, everybody can decide what they like. So you're supposed to put, sorry, I got, okay. I think I may have gone out of order here. I apologize. So let me try to get back on track here, so I know what, you know, I'm telling you the right things. So basically you're looking at 2 quarts. So this is 1 quart. So I need to do 1 more quart. And I'm using the water. I just happen to, my first batch I used, I actually used the already prepared vegetable broth, but this time I'm using the vegetable base, which you add the water, and then you add the actual, the broth, the base itself, which basically, again, this is not my kitchen, so I have no idea where things are. Okay. I thought I got everything out, but apparently I did not think of everything. Okay. One more. Sorry for the noise. Let's try this. Okay. So we have, this is getting ready. This is the onions. Basically, this is almost done. We can almost put the mushrooms in. So basically, we're sauteing them until they're clear. You know, the typical, sauteing of the onions. I don't need this. Okay. Carrots and mushrooms. Okay. So there's the broth. Okay. I love the smell of onions. So, okay. So here's the onions. And then we put all the mushrooms in. This is the 8 ounces of the white. And basically, you know, with the mushrooms again, I'm going to tell you that whenever I especially make soup, I'm not always to the T when it comes to how much of what I put in. If I like something a little more than others, I put a little more than what the recipe calls. But, you know, obviously the stock, you need to actually follow the directions for the stock. But the vegetables and the other things that go into it, you know, again, it's preference in regards to what you may like. So you have the onions and then the mushrooms. We have to kind of do this a bit to get them a little sauteed. So while that's doing it, I actually watched a video, which I think, Mara, when you shared an article about Krupnik, they had a video, and I think Mara probably has it, but it's very interesting watching it. It's basically done in Yiddish, but it's a YouTube video of 2 women making Krupnik, and they have some really good asides when it comes to things that you can do. It's a very different recipe. Their recipe basically had the root vegetable. They used turnip, carrots, and celery root. They cut them up, put them in, pulverized them in the food processor. They added the mushrooms and the various mushrooms and onions, and of course they had the dry mushrooms, and they added red wine, soy sauce, garlic, and I think that those were the 3. So basically, soy sauce is one of those things that you can actually add if you don't want to use meat, but you want it to have a meat flavor. Soy sauce actually added to mushroom barley, it does actually taste a little like beef, even though there's no meat in it. So that was kind of a something I picked up from that video that I had watched. So, but I think for as many, there as many cookbooks there are, I'm sure that there are different variations of the actual recipe. But Krupnik itself, basically from the old country. The other thing that they talked about was the barley. There are various, that's a good question. Judy actually asked if a bit of miso could be added.
Actually, that's me today.
Oh, is that you? Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Yes, I'm sure that you could. Yes. So, it's one of those things where I think that mushroom barley, I don't think that there's much you can do to ruin mushroom barley. So I shouldn't say that. I guess you could, but, and I know I actually, depending on what I'm making it for, I periodically make beef mushroom barley soup with stew, stew meat. But not always, actually. I think it's just a matter of what we happen to be in the mood for. So, okay. So it looks like the mushrooms and onions are good. Now we add the celery, which I will switch it back again so you can see. So once this is done cooking, everything has to be soft. And unfortunately, I couldn't figure, I know Susan had told me that there were some issues with a couple of the burners on her stove, and I didn't quite catch exactly what the fix was. So I'm working with one burner, which is fine for soup because basically, having the sauteing, once we're done with the sauteing, all of this is going to go into the soup pot. And basically, once we get to that point, now the barley, one of the things about the barley, there are a couple different types of barley. I know that I've seen, it's typically you're using the pearl barley, which is actually, it still has the husk in it. So basically what happens, the barley, the pearl barley adds softness and a rich texture. Brown barley is hulled. So basically it tends to add a chewy texture. So you can actually do one or the other, or again, you can actually mix it and put both in. You just have to try the different textures out and decide what you like. And, the next time you make it with what your preference is. So there are so many variations of it that there's not one better way. I think it's just a matter of what people like. So now we are done with this. I'm going to move. So basically, could you use Pharaoh? I'm sure you could. I mean, basically, it wouldn't be Krupnik, but it's a variation of the mushroom barley soup. So
I've used Pharaoh when I'm out of barley.
Okay, yeah. So it's very similar.
You're also it's a lot more protein for to have that. But I wanted to ask you, how do you spell Krupnik?
Krupnik, or you might see it with Nick. I think it has various spellings because it's an archaic word. So, which basically, I'm not sure that I actually, yes, it's the archaic word for barley is what it is. So here we go. So we have everything in. We're putting the mushroom in. We put all this in. We're putting the carrot, the diced carrot in order to sweeten it a bit, to kind of take away the bitterness of, the celery. So this, basically you put this in, and this is where this is where you're stirring it up, and you put it on, you heat it, you have it on medium heat, and you do it for about an hour. And after an hour, you basically put your barley in and you cook it for another half hour. And, you know, I tend to simmer my soups because I like things soft and melting in my mouth versus having to chew. So there's not much. I mean, basically, we've done everything that the recipe calls for, except for the barley, which we can't put it in until this has basically cooked from the last standpoint of, yeah, you're cooking covered over medium heat for 1 hour, stirring occasionally so that the beans don't get stuck to the bottom. And then you add the barley and you cook it for a half hour to an hour longer. Now I'm going to show you the soup that my grandson and I actually made. And it actually looks pretty good. So there's our soup. It kind of looks picture perfect. Except for I didn't have any parsley, you know, fresh parsley, you know, to kind of jazz it up when you serve it. And then we actually bought some artisan's bread to have with it, and you have a meal. So it's pretty hearty. So that's what I have. So are there any specific questions that you might have that I may be able to answer?
Laura, does it freeze well, or does it mess up the barley's texture if you freeze it and unfreeze it?
I have frozen it, but I have to tell you that it doesn't have the same texture. But it still tastes good. It just, if you're one of those people that are very big on what the texture of food is, it may actually be something that you don't want to do. You know, so what I usually do, I'm going to tell you that I typically do not freeze soup. I share soup with my neighbor across the street, who is Cantor Henry Shapiro from Jewish Parkway Center. He and I, through the pandemic, have been sharing soups. He makes his soup. So I just give my soup away to, to anyone that might have an interest in not having to cook. So
I'll give you my address.
Okay, well, next time I make soup, I will, you know, in fact, if you want some of this mushroom barley soup, I'd be more than happy to get it over to you.
Great.
I have a question. I'm curious. Sure. Joanna's mom, who's a very good cook, okay, she likes to cook the barley separate and then add it to the stock, simply because that way you have a soup that's more liquid rather than, you know, the barley soaking up all the fluids.
Yes, you're right. I've seen in some recipes, they actually suggest that you do that because of that reason. And I know that typically, if you have leftover soup and there's not enough broth, they just tell you to add more broth because, yes, the barley does soak up a lot of the liquid.
Okay. And since I mentioned her, I might suggest, years ago, her and I were talking about cooking because I love to cook, but she said that the best way to do any kind of cooking is to do all your prep work.
Like you did.
And before you turn your heat on, pour yourself a glass of sherry, and then just as you're adding stuff in, just enjoy the aromas of everything.
I have to tell you, yes.
That's when I really, I think, started getting more serious about cooking because it does. I mean, it's an experience, you know.
Yeah. Well, Joy actually asked about the beef, and I'm going to tell you, typically, I'll take a mushroom barley, you know, the recipe that we just made, and I'll actually take my beef and cook it separately. And then basically you cook it for a while, but then it's important to actually cook it in the soup also. So that way the soup actually absorbs the flavor and it also softens, because typically I don't use a good cut of meat. I usually use the stew meat that, you know, it's a little rough, but you can probably use various, I know that various recipes call for different types of beef. So, you know, and I think people can choose, you know, if you actually have people in your household that some like meat and some don't, you can definitely keep the beef separate, but it's not gonna, I don't think the flavor of the mushroom barley is not going to taste as beefy unless you're eating, you know, the actual piece of meat. So I kind of like the flavor being absorbed. Okay.
Laura?
Yes.
About a month or two ago, I was looking for dried mushrooms at the Giant Eagle here on Murray Avenue, right near Forbes and Murray. Mm-hmm. And they moved them. They used to have them on the shelf where the canned vegetables and stuff were, and they moved them, the dried ones, to the shelf just above where the fresh mushrooms were.
Yeah, actually, I don't know whether you were on when I had mentioned that I went to several different places looking for the dried mushrooms, and I finally, I was talking.
Yeah, I was.
Oh, okay.
So maybe there's some shortage now. I don't know.
Yeah, that's basically what the manager of produce told me at the Shadyside Market District, that they've been ordering them, but they haven't been coming in. So I'm guessing it's probably, you know, a pandemic freight issue. It's probably stuck on some ship in a crate somewhere that hasn't made it to the States. But yeah, so, I mean, it definitely does make a difference when you use the dried wild mushrooms. It has, well, I mean, basically it has a different flavor to it. So again, it boils down to finding a recipe that you and your family like. I like to try various ones because I'm not very particular about, I like trying different flavor. It doesn't have to taste all the same. I like variety. So.
Now, do you process the mushrooms and make them smooth too sometimes?
Are you referring to putting them in a food processor?
Right.
You can, depending on what consistency you like with your soup, because there are some recipes that, you know, if that's your preference, you know, taking the mushrooms that I sauteed, you can actually pulverize them in the food processor and basically kind of stir it in with the onions and celery, and it's fine. So, but if anybody wants some mushroom barley soup, I actually have 2 soup pots of it, and there's only me right now, so I can only eat so much mushroom barley soup, and I'd be more than happy to put them in soup containers and drive them around. It's going to be contactless, you know, but I'm actually, you know, I'd be willing to do that for anybody who may want some of this soup, so I can share it. Okay. All right. Good. Well, unfortunately, I can't ship to North Carolina. I wish I could. Maybe if I come visit. I wouldn't mind coming to visit, but yeah, a little far.
Does anybody have any other questions for Laura?
Looks really good. I'm excited to try it.
Which of the recipes did you use? Was it the first one?
Yeah,
it's the one that's got the it's from there, but it's also got a whisk on it. All the ones that we're making
here.
I see it.
Here's my whisk.
Yeah. And I think it's the only one that is called Krupnik. I think the other ones basically have mushroom barley, but yeah, it's basically the entree to Judaism for families. It's out of that cookbook.
Oh, I have that cookbook. I'd never have made that recipe.
Well, there you go. See, now you'll have to try it.
I've never made it with beans before. I was feeling bad because it wouldn't have much protein.
Well, I mean, basically the lima beans, well, protein wise, I mean, that's where, you know, the meat comes in. If you don't, it just depends on what, if you don't keep kosher, you know, a lot of people use a vegetarian because it's much easier to keep it parve if they're keeping, you know, if they have kashrut. I think that, you know, when, you know, obviously, yeah.
I didn't know about the beans. The beans give it protein.
Yeah, yeah, the lima beans.
Never made it with beans, so I have to try that.
Yeah, the lima beans basically, again, you really can't even tell. I don't like lima beans by themselves, but in this recipe, you can't tell. It adds, I think it adds more to the texture than it does to the taste.
So you
could also
use any kind of white bean.
Yes, you could. But in order to do what you need to do with taking the skins off, some of the beans are pretty small. So I think unless you use some type of, you know, the sieve, I don't know whether that would work or not. I've never tried it.
Or use a can of the beans that are already peeled.
Sure.
The canned beans are already peeled?
Yeah.
That sounds good.
You told us that you can't taste them because I also would never choose to use lima beans. But if it's just for texture, it's worth a try.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
And protein.
Sure, yes. So I was surprised. We tried it because it was in the book that I've been using with my grandson. So well, you know, I don't want to tell him I don't like lima beans because I don't want him to start saying that he doesn't like certain things. We try everything. Don't want him to be a picky eater. I'm trying, but hey, I don't have I don't have much to say over that. So I'm the grandma.
Okay, now in defense of lima beans, they're rich in potassium, iron, magnesium, and vitamin C. They also provide zinc, calcium, vitamin K, and vitamin A. So you're in good hands with a lima bean, whether or not you like it.
Well, you just have to, you mask it in a soup. You're getting the lima beans and, you know, you don't have to taste them.
And they dissolve without being processed?
Well, basically when you're simmering the soup, they because the skin is off, they soften. And the longer you simmer the soup, the more they absorb into the broth. So you really, you know, again, it's whether you want to cook them to death so you don't know they're there, or have, you know, something that you're biting into that you don't necessarily know that it's a lima bean, but it's texture.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for sharing with us and all of the research and stuff that you shared with us.
It was my pleasure.
So we really appreciate it. Next week is Kugels, done by Deborah Friedman. Oh. And then we're taking a break for a week. And on the 14th is one of our Make and Eats in the Building workshop. And Jody Thomas, who is a native of Jamaica, is going to come into the building with anyone who feels comfortable to do so. And we'll be making goat curry and other Jamaican recipes. And then that Tuesday, the 15th, online as part of this series, Saul Straussman will be doing Hamantaschen because on Wednesday it's Erev Purim, which is hard to believe that that is coming up so soon. So if you, the recipe that Saul has looks really interesting. So mark your calendars for that. And thank you all for attending. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you,
Good
Laura.
seeing everyone.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.